Welcome to Charting.
Charting. The Charting show was yesterday.
Yesterday. This is Charting.
Charting, yes.
With Dan.
Hello.
With Mr. Dan Murrell, I'm Roth Cornet. We're here to talk about the weekend that was in the box office.
Ooh, it feels we've done this like 3 times now, and every time we open the show talking about how bad of a weekend it was, but every weekend has gotten worse.
Yeah, this one's really bad.
This August than the one before it. So yes, it was another. This movie came within about $500,000 of being the lowest grossing weekend of the year. The only weekend that has grossed lower than this past weekend was Super Bowl weekend, which is an awful week. But this is August, and that's the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and so a couple of reasons for that, I think, and I'm curious your take in terms of the type of films that are out that are being released right now this August. And then I'm curious if you think, look, The Defenders was released this weekend, Game of Thrones was on, it was a big episode. Is it possible that people are just preferring to stay in and watch what's on television or Netflix?
I think that's part of it, and I think part of it is also, we were talking about how all the talk is about how this summer is vastly underperforming versus last summer, but the spring overperformed by quite a bit, and I think we're starting to see the continued breakdown of the concept of a blockbuster season. The studios, Dark Tower was maybe the biggest studio movie that was scheduled for this August, and even that I don't think Sony thought was going to be a Suicide Squad type hit, as far as like it's going to open at $80 million and gross $350 million. So the studios have largely abandoned this month as far as big summer movies go. And I think you're seeing this, they're pushing them. They're pushing them to September. Thor Ragnarok is coming out in November. And I think that this is just further proof of the fact that we're moving away from this summer blockbuster season, and it's a year-round release schedule.
Yeah, even more evidence of that is that no big releases are coming on Labor Day.
Nothing. Literally no wide releases are happening on Labor Day. As far as like movies going into theaters nationwide, nothing is opening.
Yeah.
But Labor Day is generally a wasteland for a box. I mean, there has not been really, I think Rob Zombie's Halloween was like the biggest Labor Day movie ever. So it's not like Labor Day. It's studios just going like, whatever we put there is not going to make any money anyway. So we're just not going to open anything.
Yeah. Go have your barbecue.
Go have your barbecue and enjoy the end of the summer. Yeah.
Let's look at what did happen. What was the top 5 this weekend?
Well, the Hitman's Bodyguard actually overperformed a little bit with expectations. $21 million. That's a good number for that movie. It's for the budget of that movie. It is another movie like The Dark Tower, like the Emoji Movie, that weathered what appeared to be bad reviews to actually open decently, or at least in line with studio expectations. So Hitman's Bodyguard is, looking to perform about to expectation. It's not going to be a breakout hit, but it's certainly not looking like it's going to be a flop either. And I think it's another case of, I did this story on Rotten Tomatoes here on News. It's another case of the tomato score being very deceptive, because the tomato score was somewhere in the 30s. The average rating that critics gave it was about a 5, around a 5, and that's kind of what we said. We both reviewed the movie positively, and I think that audiences kind of took it for what it was. It's a late summer popcorn movie,
action movie.
It's a matinee. It's a throwback, and I think that that's kind of one of the few movies that are review proof in a way. Is like, that's a movie that audiences are going to go, they're going to enjoy. Is it going to be one of their favorite movies of the year? Probably not. But it's a perfect late summer thing of just like, it's a Saturday and I just started school, or school is starting, although it's rated R, so I guess the kids can't go see it. But if you're going to college, if you're moving in, if you're going just looking for something in the weekend, that's the perfect movie. It's something new. It's not something you've seen before. It's going to be fun, but it's also not going to be a huge blockbuster.
Yeah, it's not going to tax you too much. Another movie that opened this weekend was Steven Soderbergh's return to the theatrical directing chair. Logan Lucky, which we've talked about this in another video as well. He tried his different distribution model with this movie. He did not go with one of the big studios to distribute this film. We talked about how it was a gamble, and it does not look like that gamble paid off, because it opened with about, the projection was $8 million. It actually came in a little bit less than $8 million. Not performing to what they had hoped that it would, and a lot of people were saying like this is going to be a litmus test for this new venue of distribution, where Steven Soderbergh didn't pay exhibitors, he didn't pay these marketing fees, he didn't do this huge promotional push. He kind of farmed it out and then used the strategy of, I'm going to use targeted marketing shortly before the movie comes out
and it doesn't look like it got the word out enough, which is, I saw Logan Lucky, and this is one of the more mainstream Steven Soderbergh movies. It has a lot of humor. It's a heist film. You've got Channing Tatum. This movie has the elements to, I think, potentially have been kind of a more mainstream success, had that breakout potential. And I think the strategy, I'm not going to say it was a bad idea, but I don't know if Steven Soderbergh picked the right movie to try the strategy on, because I think this is a movie that could have had crossover appeal in several different places, and I just don't think a lot of people knew what it was.
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting thing, because I wondered, even if he was going to experiment with the distribution model, why didn't he experiment in a way that he's talked about before? And look, this is an experimental guy. You know, he likes to play with form in his movies, and he likes to play with how movies are done and distributed. Why he didn't do day and date with VOD was actually the piece that was really befuddling to me about this.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot that, now seeing the movie, because not knowing much about the movie, mainly due to the fact that there wasn't much marketing, I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know if this would be kind of a Magic Mike type movie where it has a concept that seems very broadly appealing, and then you watch the movie and it's got this very independent mindset and it doesn't go where you think that it's going to go. Logan Lucky's not like that. It's a fairly straightforward heist comedy movie. Daniel Craig is great in it. Adam Driver is great in it. And it just really fell flat. And yeah, I think this could be an admirable attempt at something new that maybe just hit with the wrong movie, because I think this is going to be one of those movies that people find later on, maybe through word of mouth. I don't know how much money this is going to make. I just don't know if it got to enough people, but that they find in a year or two, or if it goes on Netflix and you're like, oh, I saw this movie Logan Lucky. It wasn't bad.
Well, I'll say this. I was in watching The Defenders this weekend and then Game of Thrones a couple of times on Sunday night. But I would have watched it if it was on VOD, and I love Soderbergh. I may check it out in the theater. Yet, as I've said before, Magic Mike is the two-lane blacktop of male stripping movies. So yeah, it is very much an indie movie, but you make this sound like a good time. You know what people do love and that does have box office power is the Conjuring franchise.
The Conjuring, yeah. It's like Annabelle Creation was the #2 performer this weekend. It's performing slightly ahead of the first Annabelle movie, so if it keeps to that track, it's going to make around $85–90 million, which is great. That's a movie that had a $15 million budget, and it's going to make $85–90 million. And I was looking up some numbers on this. Annabelle Creation was the #1 international movie globally, worldwide this weekend. It's made $162 million worldwide. So if you think it's great that it's made what it has here, it's made $162 million worldwide off of a $15 million budget. The Conjuring franchise, which is Conjuring 1 and 2, the two Annabelle movies, has now grossed $1 billion worldwide. $1 billion worldwide.
I know.
It's grossed $1 billion off of a combined budget, all four movies, $81 million.
It's amazing.
That is insane. This is this franchise is a cash cow. Its budget is less than 1/10 of its worldwide gross. Like that, you don't see that.
Yeah.
You see that maybe for the first movies or two, but for a franchise to make $1 billion off of a combined budget of $81 million, like this for Warner Brothers is a cash cow franchise. How
many creepy doll movies are we going to get in the next 5 years? Leave your thoughts.
Hopefully not a lot. I mean, we're getting another one next year, The Nun, which is a spinoff of The Conjuring 2, which they're kind of being smart about it, which is like they're using the Conjuring movies, which, as we discussed last week, I'm not a huge horror fan, but I like good horror movies. I liked both the Conjuring movies, and they're kind of doing the smart thing. They're not running the Conjuring franchise into the ground like they did with Paranormal Activity or Saw. They're doing a few Conjuring movies, and then they're taking these breakout ghost characters from The Conjuring and spinning them off into their own side franchises, because we're going to get The Nun. That was a very scary character from Conjuring 2.
Yes.
I bet that movie's going to open up really well, probably on a low budget. Annabelle was kind of a breakout one from first Conjuring, so they're being very smart with how they do this franchise.
And it's built in that way, right? It's sort of, the nice thing about that is it's organic to the story, that there would be all of these other stories to do. It is actually a very smart way to do that. Let's talk about per screen, the little movies that could.
Per screen, I love talking about the little movies that could, and you see these more and more. Sometimes in the summer, if a movie's big enough, then it wins the per screen race. But a lot of times in the summer, and then as we get into the summer and fall, these smaller movies win it. There's a movie that was playing on 2 screens this weekend. It's a very provocatively named movie, so just be warned. But the movie's called Gook. It is written and directed and starring by Justin Chon, who actually had a role in the Twilight series. He played Bella's friend Eric in the Twilight series. But he wrote, directed, and starred in this movie. It won the Sundance Best of Next Audience Award. It is shot in black and white. It takes place in Los Angeles on the day that the Rodney King verdict was handed down. And it is about it's kind of a slice of life. It's a very small indie movie, slice of life. It goes a little bit into the racial dynamics of Korean Americans and African Americans, particularly in Los Angeles, particularly at that time. But it's not a very wide-ranging story in a way of like, it's not telling the story of the LA riots. It's very character-focused, very character-centric. And it really, like I said, per screen, did very well this week, and it'll be expanding in the weeks ahead. And this is the kind of movie, like, is it going to have that breakout potential? I mean, like I said, it's very provocatively named. It certainly grabs your attention. But it kind of shows you're seeing these stories being told this year, very culturally meaningful stories from filmmakers from that culture. And I think that, Justin Chon is a Korean American. This is a Korean American story, and we'll see how it rolls out. But Gook playing in Los Angeles this weekend, rolling out, I think, slowly as the weeks go on. This is one to watch for. Is it going to garner Oscar contention? Who knows? But this is definitely a movie that I think come Independent Spirit Award time, you might hear about more and more. Particularly, like I said, it's a very attention-grabbing, provocative film, and Justin Chon's been very forward about saying, like, he's aware of that and he wants to put that up front,
which is frankly a smart thing to do. We were talking about it's very difficult for independent films to get any attention, and I think particularly if it's a topic that you're passionate about, to some degree, it makes sense to use all the tools available to you, especially
as a Korean American, and to take that word, which is used very derogatively, has been traditionally used very derogatively to refer to Koreans, also to Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. But to take that word, and the movie kind of delves into what that word really means too, because it has different meanings. Particularly, it comes from a Korean word. And this movie I didn't get a chance to see this weekend, but then I'm very much looking forward to see. But if you are looking for a story about maybe a side of the cultural heritage and a time in LA that you didn't know that much about, that's certainly something I'm looking forward to. And check it out.
Me too. I love the Indie Minute here. Maybe we should do a more formal Indie Minute. Let's talk about action movies and how Hitman's Bodyguard stacks up against other action openings.
Yeah, well, these are the top 5 action openings for this year. Now, some of them were this was my own quantification. Some of them, like Transformers. Sure. I'm like, well, that's more sci-fi action. Like, this for me was like pure action. Gunfights, car chases, etc. Traditional action. This is how action movies have fared in 2017. Fate of the Furious, obviously, the torchbearer for that right now. John Wick Chapter 2, Hitman's Bodyguard, right there in the middle. And then Baby Driver, which I struggled with, but that to me qualifies as action. Triple X, Return of Xander Cage. Number 6 on that list would be Atomic Blonde. But, we are seeing a few more. This is a genre that comes and goes. I think, for a while, action movies were the comic book movies of Hollywood. That was every year, the Schwarzenegger Stallone movies. That was the big thing, the franchise or the big tentpole movies. But I like seeing these kind of smaller. Some of them are throwbacks. Some of them, like John Wick, are playing with the convention. But I'm an action movie fan, so it's fun to see. Like, that's if you look at those 5 movies, that is like every shade of action movie. Right there.
And it's funny because the Fast and the Furious, I think by now, is really its own animal.
It is.
It's definitely not. It's an action movie, certainly, but it's a kind of in its own lane action movie. It's an action cartoon, live action cartoon action movie in a way. You need to be completely. Action movies do not follow the conventions of, say, physics and reality normally, but certainly that one absolutely doesn't. I'm a fan. You're not. We can get into that another day.
And we have.
Let's talk about the summer.
The summer chart. We teased this last week. It officially happened. This will probably be the last big shakeup on the summer chart. But Baby Driver had been clinging to that number 10 spot. It has now dropped off the chart. And these are your top 10 summer movies. Girls Trip took the number 10 spot. It is now, that is going to be your top 10. I think Dunkirk may jump Pirates of the Caribbean. We'll see if Girls Trip continues to leg out. It has a shot maybe at unseating Transformers, but I think it'll probably end up at number 10. But yeah, Girls Trip is the number 10 movie of the summer. Baby Driver right behind. And I wanted to look at, because we've talked a lot about Patty Jenkins this summer and what she did with Wonder Woman, but I want to talk about Malcolm D. Lee, who is the director of Girls Trip. This is by far his biggest movies, but the other thing that we've talked about a lot, particularly with Get Out, and these kind of mid-grossing movies. Logan is one that we talked about, an $80 million movie with a huge return. These kind of mid-budgeted movies. Is there room in Hollywood for these kind of things? We're seeing some of them resurge this year. Malcolm D. Lee has kind of been perfecting this formula for a while, and I wanted to look at his top 5 movies. Girls Trip is number 1, obviously. Now, these are adjusted for inflation, but if you look at these, Best Man Holiday, $75 million, Undercover Brother, $59 million, Best Man, $59 million, Barbershop, $55 million. What he's been able to do is take movies that are focused at the African-American audience. His box office revenues are more than doubling his budget, which is basically, traditionally what he's been doing is taking a budget of $20 million and delivering a $40 million or more movie. Particularly his last few. His last 3 movies have at least doubled their budget. Best Man Holiday, I think, tripled its budget. Girls Trip is going to make 5 times or more of its budget. And I think that there's a lot of talk about, like, oh, if you're making movies that are targeted to a black audience, that's risky financially, and that's not necessarily the case. Particularly with Malcolm D. Lee, he has taken small budgets and turned them into either crossover hits or hits that have hit massively in the African American audience, that have really maximized that potential. And if you look at those 5 movies, his top 5 movies, all of them well reviewed. So he's not just delivering hits; he's delivering quality.
Yeah, these are good movies.
Yeah, these are good movies, and I think that people like Malcolm D. Lee that can take small budgets and turn that around, like. The movie business is still a business, and it's not just about taking a $200 million budget and delivering an $800 million film. If you can take consistently a $20 million budget and deliver a $40 million, $60 million, $80 million gross, like that's rare.
Yeah, and it's the return on investment is obviously a key, right?
Yeah,
it is
huge key.
It is a huge key, of course. Look, I think studios want billion-dollar movies, not only because they want the $1 billion. They spend a lot of money to get there, typically, to get to $1 billion. Not in the case of the Conjuring franchise, but typically it costs money to get to that dollar. But it's also a thing you can kind of wave around. You know, you can brag about. But at the end of the day, making money is the name of the game. And I, for one, would be only too. Get Out remains right now one of my absolute favorite movies of the year. It may net out as number 1. I'm not sure yet. Still much more of the year to go.
Annabelle Creation is going to make a lot of its money. Girls Trip is going to return a huge amount.
Sure, but what's great about that film in particular, and a number of these films that we're talking about, but that film in particular, is that it's such an excellent movie that was made at a reasonable price and made a ton of money. And my hope is that we will start to see more and more of these mid-level movies come back again, because it's been difficult in the last few years to kind of break through with them. It's been harder for creators to make interesting films. Yeah. So if they start to see it be profitable again, we might see a wider variety of films and filmmakers and voices. And that's the good news. I think out of 2017, even with the box office down, the good news out of that is that I think is what we will start to see.
I hope so. And I also hope that as movies like, hopefully, Girls Trip, these mid-budget movies come in and start making big profits, I hope studios, and I'm not saying that Malcolm D. Lee should get the next Marvel movie. I'm just saying, like, we should be talking about directors that can consistently turn a profit and deliver a good product in the same breath that we talk about blockbuster directors, because that's just as vital to the film business. Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, we've talked about what Patty Jenkins has done in the realm of a female-directed movie. Wonder Woman obviously has made more money than any movie ever with a female director. Now, officially, with Girls Trip making $100 million, with Fate of the Furious making over $100 million, and with Get Out making over $100 million, this is the first time ever that 3 films by black directors have made $100 million at the box office in the same year. That's never happened at the U.S. box office in history. And already looking at next year, we have A Wrinkle in Time and Black Panther, two huge blockbuster films that are led by Black directors. And so, you know, I think that...
And Ava DuVernay's obviously also a woman.
Exactly. and a woman, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that hopefully people will look back on this year as a keystone year where, you know, this has been a conversation really for a very long time, but in the mainstream since the Oscars So White controversy a couple years ago. And I'm hoping that people will look back at this year and say 2017 was the year that we finally started seeing this incremental progress in not just kind of a cynical tokenism of, oh, well, we need to recruit this person, but in giving talented artists, no matter what their race or their gender, but especially females and African Americans this year, taking these projects and being so successful with them. I hope that people don't look at 2017 and go like, okay, the job's done, but as a case of just like this is progress. This is step one.
Like step one, opportunity.
Yeah. But you know, so much conventional wisdom has been broken this year at the box office, and I hope that this is not something that's lost in the shuffle, because I think this is a huge deal. And I think it's a huge deal that it's not a huge deal. Like the headline isn't that I had to go back and do research and see if this had ever happened before, and it hadn't. So, but I think this is something else that people keep in mind as they look at this year and say, like, you know, there are so many different voices out there and so many stories to be told, and let's not limit which ones are told and who gets to tell them, because we're seeing the fruits of that labor pay off this year.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. And I hope that the story of this year in total is that more voices make for more interesting stories that people want to see. Yeah. Because they're great stories, and these are good films, and they're human stories. I mean, we can talk about Fast and the Furious later again.
But that's its own kind of thing.
It's its own
that
thing.
Kind of billion-dollar global franchise smashing hit, like that in its own, that's an incredible achievement.
Absolutely.
Just from a filmmaking standpoint, but to have an African-American director at the helm of that kind of movie and that franchise, that's its own kind of achievement. Whatever I think of the movie personally, that's massive. Yeah. That's great. So... Here's to more. I hope so.
Here's to 2017, which has been a rocky year at the box office in some respects, but a really good year for movies in other respects. Let's talk about the world.
Yeah, let's move out of the U.S. So let's go to the worldwide box office, and we'll start with the movie that I've been talking about for the past few weeks, Wolf Warrior 2. It continues. It's now the 7th highest grossing movie of the year. It has earned more in China than Avatar. James Cameron's Avatar earned here in the U.S., which means it is the 2nd highest single territory gross for any movie ever. It has beaten the North American gross for Avatar. It is now the number 7 highest grossing movie of the year. Globally, almost all of that money coming from China. I mean, it is the Avatar. What Avatar was here, that is what is happening in China right now with Wolf Warrior 2. That just for me continues to be the big international story of the summer. That and the amount of money that the international box office has contributed to U.S. franchises, particularly Despicable Me, which is close to $1 billion. It's creeping up on $1 billion.
All right, that's globally. It, Dan. We're packed right here, right now. Look, I will confess, I had to fix my alternator this weekend. Things were happening. I needed to watch Defenders and Game of Thrones. But next weekend,
Wolf Warrior 2.
Wolf Warrior 1 first on Netflix.
Instant right now. We found it. Apparently, you can watch it on Netflix Instant and then go. Well, the problem is that Wolf Warrior 2 is probably not playing anywhere near you unless you happen to live in Los Angeles or New York.
Well, we can go see it, and we can let you know.
Yeah,
we can let you know next week. Let's talk about Wonder Woman continues.
Wonder Woman continues. It passed the $800 million mark at the international box office. That's great. A couple summer things that I was looking at. Transformers is now pretty much guaranteed to be the lowest grossing live-action Transformers film worldwide. So its doldrum here in the U.S. has now officially cemented itself at the worldwide box office.
Where are you on the feeling chart about that?
I just, you know, I mean, but we got Bumblebee. We have all the spinoffs coming off. If there's a great Transformers movie, I would want it to do great. Yeah. I think the last several have been awful. Yeah. So it's great to see a movie that is not very good do poorly, because that means that maybe they won't make more not very good movies. That's how I see it.
Right. The hope is pretty simple. Make more good movies and fewer bad movies. But you know what? No one's trying to make a bad movie. That's the thing. No one's trying to make a bad movie.
No. Well, I don't know. We'll see. And then one last note that I wanted to know, because Wolf Warrior 2 did jump Spider-Man Homecoming internationally, but one thing that I actually didn't realize that I had to look up this week is Spider-Man Homecoming actually has not opened yet in China. It opens in China on September 8th.
That is such a long
It is a very long delay. It opens in China on September 8th. Amazing Spider-Man 2 made about $95 million in China, so Spider-Man Homecoming seems to have kind of settled down globally. There will most likely be some kind of a pop early next month when it hits China. We'll see how much money it makes there, or if Wolf Warrior 2 just ate up all the dollars.
Sick of Wolf Warrior
exactly.
2 at that point.
But yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming is going to get a little bit of a boost, or a lot of a boost. We'll see from when it opens in China. So the book hasn't quite been written on that movie internationally yet. But other than that, summer box office, even worldwide, kind of starting to draw to a close, and we're starting to see what our conclusions are. So a lot of fun.
Final Spidey senses have to do. It has nothing to do with Spidey senses, but still, we'll see what happens with Spider-Man.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Dan.
So much fun. Love doing it.
I love hearing about the charts, and it's so great to hear about some of these little films. I hope you guys enjoy it too. We promise this time that we will be Wolf Warrioring by the time you see us next Monday. We'll see. We're going to try. All right.
It's a busy week.
It's a busy week. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Dan.
Of course.
Follow you on Twitter at
Murrell Dan.
You should do it because he makes amazing charts. I'm at Roth Cornet. Thank you guys for joining us. We will see you next Monday. And please do, as always, be excellent to each other.